This story is about a human blacksmith named Tamlin who lost his family to dragons' fiery attacks. The elves, once allies, left the humans to fight alone. Tamlin becomes obsessed with making armor strong enough to resist dragon fire. A dying traveler brings him secret knowledge about a magical metal called starben steel, which can remember fire and protect its wearer. Meanwhile, an elf archivist named Lurel discovers an ancient prophecy that says humans might be the key to ending the curse that turned dragons into monsters. Tamlin forges a new kind of armor, one that can stand up to dragon fire, and faces a fierce dragon to prove it. When Lurel finds him, they join forces. Together, they plan to enter the mind of the oldest cursed dragon to try to break the ancient curse and save the world. This story is intense, emotional, and full of hope and danger. It shows grief, courage, and the power of memory. The rhythm of hammer striking anvil filled the mountain village of Castal. Tamlin's arms moved with steady power, each blow sending a sharp ring through the cold air. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with dirt and tears he no longer noticed. For days, he had worked without rest, driven by a fire inside stronger than any forge flame. His family had been taken by dragons, creatures once proud and noble, now twisted by a cruel curse. The village around him felt empty, the loss heavy like a shadow on every wall. Tamlin's hammer fell again. The black ore on his anvil seemed to drink in the heat, glowing softly in the fading light. This metal was unlike any other, a strange gift from the stars, heavy and stubborn. It was the last hope of his people. A voice called from the doorway. "Tamlin, you have worked yourself too hard," said Halwyn, the village elder. His face was lined with age, but his eyes held kindness. "The council sent word today. Another village in the eastern valleys has fallen. Ashkeep is gone." Tamlin closed his eyes, the news sinking deep. So many homes burned to ash. So many lives lost. The elves had promised protection, magic wards to keep the dragons away. But the wards had failed, or perhaps they had never truly tried. The elves had retreated to their forests, leaving the humans to face the fire alone. Halwyn stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There is more. A traveler from beyond the Ghost Marsh came today. He is dying of dragon venom, but he asks for you." Tamlin's heart quickened. The Ghost Marsh was a place of dark spirits and deadly mist. Few dared to cross it. "Why me?" Tamlin asked. Halwyn shook his head. He would not say. But he claims to have knowledge that could help. Tamlin gathered his cloak and followed Halwyn to the healing house. Inside, the smell of herbs and death filled the air. A man lay on a straw pallet, pale and weak. His skin was marked with black veins spreading from a wound on his neck. Dragon venom was a slow and terrible poison. The man opened his pale blue eyes and whispered, "You are the smith who lost everything." Tamlin nodded, unsure what the man wanted. "My name is Corvin," the traveler said. "I was a keeper of lore in Asteria, the city of knowledge. Before it burned." Tamlin had heard stories of Asteria, once a shining place full of wisdom, now a ruin. "You seek to forge armor that can stand against dragon fire," Corvin said weakly. "Many laugh at the idea. They say it is impossible. But there are ancient texts, scrolls from the First Dragon War. They speak of a metal called starben steel. It remembers fire and will not yield to flame." Tamlin felt a spark of hope he had not felt in years. "Where do I find this metal?" he asked eagerly. Corvin smiled faintly. "You already have it. The black ore from your mountains is star ore. Your people have shaped tools from it, never knowing its power." Tamlin's mind raced. The ore was hard to work, but he had kept it for special projects. "And the dragon blood?" he pressed. Corvin's breath was weak. "Not blood, but tears. The willing tears of a dragon before the blight. The metal is forged not just with ore, but with memory, pain, and intent. Each hammer blow carries a moment remembered. Each fold honors a love lost. His hand tightened on Tamlin's wrist. The metal remembers the fire that shaped it. That is its strength. Tamlin stood silent, the weight of the words settling in his heart. Corvin's eyes closed. It is a ritual, the healer said softly. Memory wrought into metal. Tamlin left the healing house with new purpose. If the black ore could be forged with grief and memory, perhaps there was hope. Far away, in the elven city of Sulfarian, Lurel moved through the Hall of Records. The glowing crystals above cast a cold blue light on ancient texts. Unlike most elves, she preferred the company of old knowledge over court politics. Her family had fallen from favor after her brother had vanished with his dragon to the cursed wilds. Now she searched for answers in forbidden scrolls. Lurel found what she sought, the Crimson Book, a collection of poems from the age when dragons and elves were bonded. Her eyes caught a verse that chilled her. When the stars fall from the sky to forge, when grief becomes the hammer's strength, when mortal hands shape what magic cannot touch, the circle breaks. When the fire forgets and the iron remembers, the blight shall break. She knew the elves dismissed this as poetry, but the words felt like prophecy. Mortal hands, humans, might hold the key to ending the dragon curse. She copied the verse, heart pounding. If true, everything the elves had done was wrong. The blight was a curse, born from elven arrogance, and the cure might come from the humans they abandoned. Back in Castal, Tamlin moved his forge to a hidden mineshaft. The black ore lay before him like a challenge. He thought of Miriam, his wife, her laughter like a song in the wind. He thought of Libby, his daughter, her bright eyes full of wonder before the fire took them. With each hammer blow, he named a memory. With every fold, he honored a love lost. Days passed. The armor took shape, not plates but scales overlapping like dragon hide itself. He worked tirelessly, fueled by grief and hope. Villagers came to watch, some in fear, some in wonder. When Kova, the huntress, brought news of a dragon near the village, Tamlin only smiled. "This is my shelter," he said. "My shield." That night, the armor was complete, black scales that seemed to drink light, lighter than it should be, with pieces of his lost family woven in. The dragon came, a great beast with copper scales shining in firelight. It roared and breathed flame, a wall of fire racing toward the village. Tamlin donned the armor, feeling it move with him, alive. The fire touched him, and did not burn. The dragon faltered, confused. Tamlin stood his ground, walking through the inferno as the villagers watched in shock. The dragon's attacks failed against the armor. With hammer glowing with captured fire, Tamlin struck the beast. The dragon broke and fled, a sound of frustration and fear. By morning, tales spread of the blacksmith who walked through Dragonfire unburned. The elves heard too. Lurel read the news and knew she must find this man. Together, they might end the curse. The morning light touched the peaks around Castal as Tamlin sat beside his forge, the armor resting like a silent promise on the stone floor. Word of his victory over the dragon spread quickly, drawing curious eyes and hopeful hearts. The villagers called him a hero, but Tamlin felt only the weight of loss and the heavy task ahead. One suit of armor would never be enough to save them all. The blight still burned through the land, devouring homes and lives like a cruel storm. As he worked to repair and improve the armor, a shadow fell across the workshop. Tamlin looked up to see a figure framed in the doorway, tall, slender, with sharp elven features and eyes like molten gold. Her auburn hair was braided tightly, and she moved with quiet purpose. "I am Lurel Amanil," she said calmly. "I have come to meet the man who forged armor that remembers fire." Tamlin frowned. "The elves abandoned us to burn," he said bitterly. "Why now? Why come here?" Lurel met his gaze steadily. "Because the curse that twisted the dragons began with my people. The 13 who rule the Concordat sought to bind dragons to their will. When one resisted, they cursed him, and the blight spread beyond control. The prophecy speaks of your armor as the key to breaking the curse. You have something I do not, a connection forged in memory and pain. Tamlin studied her, suspicion and weariness warring with the hope her words stirred. One armor against hundreds of dragons is no cure. No, Lurel admitted. But it may be a way in. The oldest dragon, Ashurian, remains, trapped and corrupted. If your armor can withstand his fire, it might protect you as we try to break the curse in his mind. The idea seemed madness, but desperation held them both. Tamlin agreed to join forces, though his trust was hard-won. Lurel stayed at his side, their uneasy alliance a fragile spark in a world darkened by fear and fire. The village soon faced another test. A new dragon, larger and more cunning, descended upon Castal. Its scales were deep green, nearly black in shadow, and its eyes glinted with cruel intelligence. As it loomed, Tamlin donned his armor once more, feeling its strange warmth pulse against his skin. Lurel moved beside him, ready to stand in the fight. The dragon's voice rumbled, a grinding sound like stones scraping stone. You who walk through fire, do you dare face true fury? Flames burst forth, hotter and brighter than before. But Tamlin stood firm, the armor humming with absorbed energy. Images flooded his mind, vast forests, flying dragons, cities built of light and wood. He glimpsed memories not his own, but shared in the bond the armor created. The dragon recoiled, shocked to find its own mind touched by a mortal. Lurel called out, the prophecy is true. The armor creates a link, a bond of soul and memory. The dragon snarled, retreating into the darkening sky, fear flickering in its eyes. As the village watched, awe mixed with disbelief. For the first time, dragons hesitated before human defiance. Tamlin and Lurel knew this was only the beginning. They set out together toward the shattered spire in the far north, where Ashurian lay imprisoned by crystal and curse. The journey tested them, through twisted lands where reality warped and nature warped. Trees spiraled impossibly, flowers grew upside down, and strange creatures watched from shadows. The land itself was unraveling under the blight's weight. Each step challenged their minds, forcing them to hold tight to memories and truths. Lurel spoke of her brother, the Ion, the last dragon rider to defy the Concordat. His dragon, Kais, had fallen into madness, and their fate remained a painful mystery. She clung to these memories as anchors against the unraveling world. Tamlin shared his own grief, of Miriam and Libby, lost to the fire. Their love and loss forged a strength he carried like a hidden flame. Together, they crossed impossible gaps where gravity shifted sideways or seemed not to exist. The spire awaited, a place of fractured stone suspended in space, glowing with strange colors. It pulsed with the power of the ancient curse. At the base of the spire, they prepared for the final challenge. Tamlin donned the armor once more, each piece a step deeper into memory and pain. The black scales seemed alive, vibrating with power and purpose. The doorway pulsed, opening into a chamber beyond reason, where light and space twisted unnaturally. There, suspended in crystal and shadow, lay Ashurian, titanic and broken, bones exposed, eyes empty voids. Lurel began the ritual, chanting in a forgotten tongue, drawing symbols with glowing powder. Tamlin placed his bare hands into the dragon's cursed wound, and agony exploded through him. The armor blazed white-hot, absorbing the corruption. Visions flooded Tamlin's mind, dragons burning cities, elves fleeing, centuries of pain and betrayal. But instead of breaking, he held firm, acknowledging each horror, refusing to forget. The curse flowed into the armor, which cracked under the strain but held fast. Ashurian's form began to heal, scales regaining color, the temple around them stabilizing. The ritual succeeded, but the cost was great. Tamlin collapsed, exhausted, the armor cracked and glowing with trapped corruption. They removed each piece carefully, sealing the cursed metal in the heart of the spire. Ashurian awoke, clear-eyed and free from rage. The ancient dragon bowed in respect. You have done what I thought impossible. Together, human, elf, and dragon faced the future, a world broken by fear, but with a chance for healing. The armor was gone, but its memory would live on in the bonds they forged. The dawn broke over the shattered spire, casting long shadows across the jagged stones that twisted like broken glass. Tamlin sat beside the great dragon Ashurian, the weight of exhaustion still heavy on his shoulders. The armor that had carried the curse was sealed deep within the spire's heart, locked away where its poison could harm no one. Though the burden was lifted, Tamlin's hands remained marked with intricate patterns, reminders of the terrible fire he had carried within himself. Ashurian's massive form stretched and shifted, no longer half crystal and decay, but whole and powerful. His scales shimmered deep blue under the rising sun, his eyes bright and clear. "I am grateful," he rumbled softly. "For centuries, I was lost in pain and madness. You have given me a chance to remember who I was." Lurel stood nearby, watching the dragon with a mixture of awe and relief. "The blight is contained, but the healing will take time. There are others still lost, dragons and humans alike. We must help them remember." Tamlin nodded. "It is not enough to fight fire with fire. We must forge new paths, between our peoples, between past and future." The journey back to Castel was slow and cautious. The land bore scars of ancient battles and recent chaos, forests blackened by dragon flame, villages still trembling in fear. Yet, as word spread of the cure and the fallen curse, hope began to take root like fragile shoots pushing through ash. Tamlin found himself welcomed not just as a blacksmith but as a symbol of loss, endurance, and the power of memory. The villagers listened to his story, their eyes wide with disbelief and wonder. Lurel shared what she had learned of the elven past and the true cause of the blight. Together, they called for unity and trust between humans and elves, a bond once strong but broken by fear and silence. But not all welcomed the change. The Elven Concordat, the 13 rulers who had kept the truth hidden, saw in Tamlin and Lurel a threat to their power. Whispers of rebellion stirred in the shadows of Sulfarian's crystal towers. The isolation edict remained, and the idea of a human walking openly among elves was unthinkable. Still, Lurel was determined. She carried the ancient scrolls and the truth like a torch. "The younger generation deserves to know," she told Tamlin one evening as they sat by the fire. "We must face the Concordat and demand justice." Tamlin clenched his fists. "I've never sought power or politics. I only want to protect my people and honor those we lost. And sometimes," Lurel said softly, "that means standing against those who would keep us divided." Together, they traveled to Sulfarian, carrying the memory of Ashurian's healing and the prophecy fulfilled. The city was a place of beauty and cold tradition, its walls gleaming with magic and history. The Concordat greeted them with suspicion, their silver robes rustling like the wings of trapped birds. "You bring lies and heresy," one elder hissed. "You threaten the order that keeps our people safe." Lurel stood tall, her voice steady. "The order that abandoned its allies and cursed its dragons is no order at all. The blight was not a curse of nature but a punishment born of pride. The truth must be known." Tamlin showed the cracked armor and spoke of the ritual that healed Ashurian. The hall was silent, the weight of centuries pressing down. Some elves looked away, burdened by guilt, others glared with anger. The Concordat would not surrender easily. Outside, the city stirred. Rumors spread like wildfire, igniting debates and fear. Yet the story of a human smith and an elf scholar who had broken the blight inspired many. In the hidden corners, young elves whispered of change, of a future where old wounds might heal. As the days passed, Tamlin and Lurel found allies among those tired of silence and lies. Together, they worked to rebuild trust, between species, between history and truth. Ashurian, once a symbol of destruction, became a living bridge, guiding dragons back from madness. But dangers remained. The blight's echo lingered in corrupted dragons still lost to rage. Tamlin and Lurel prepared to face these threats, knowing the road ahead was long and fraught with peril. One night, as stars sparkled like distant fires, Tamlin sat alone, staring at the sky. Memories of Miriam and Libby filled his mind, their faces clear and bright. The pain of loss remained, but now it was joined by something new, hope. From the darkness, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. You carry more than grief, Tamlin. You carry the future. He looked up to see Lurel standing in the doorway, eyes shining. Together, they faced the night, united by memory, bound by purpose, ready to forge a new world. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with shadows, yet Tamlin and Lurel moved forward with a resolve that burned brighter than any forge fire. After confronting the Concordat, their alliance had grown stronger, fueled by shared purpose and the weight of truths long buried. Yet danger lurked in the fringes, as corrupted dragons still roamed, their minds lost to rage and the Blight's poison. One morning, news came from the southern borders. A village called Ravenswood was under siege by a massive dragon, one more twisted than any Tamlin had faced. Its scales were black as night, its breath a toxic haze that withered crops and sickened the air. The people were desperate, their cries echoing over the forest. Without hesitation, Tamlin and Lurel set out, accompanied by a small band of warriors who believed in their cause. Ashurian, healed but still regal and powerful, soared above them, his presence a beacon of hope. The journey through the dense forest was tense, every rustle a possible threat. Tamlin's armor was gone, a memory sealed within the spire, but the lessons it carried shaped his every move. At Ravenswood, the destruction was raw and immediate. Homes lay in ruins, and the terrified villagers hid behind shattered walls. The dragon circled overhead, eyes gleaming with fury. Tamlin stepped into the open square, his voice ringing clear. This ends now. The dragon landed with earth-shaking force, smoke curling from its nostrils. It growled, deep and terrible, you cannot stop the blight. You only delay the inevitable. Tamlin raised his hands, speaking not just with words but with the strength of his memories. We fight not just for survival but for remembrance. For those lost to fire and silence. Though he lacked the armor, Tamlin carried within him the ritual's power, the memory forged in pain and hope. Lurel began chanting softly, her voice weaving ancient words that bound their spirits. Ashurian descended, roaring defiantly. The battle was fierce. The corrupted dragon lashed out with claws and breath, but Ashurian met it with strength born of healing. Tamlin dodged and weaved, using knowledge gained from his years as a smith, understanding heat, pressure, and the fragile balance of strength and flexibility. At a critical moment, Tamlin called upon the memory of the armor. Though he wore no metal scales, his hands glowed with the echo of the fire remembered. He struck the corrupted beast with the force of his will, and a shockwave rippled through the air. The dragon faltered, confusion flickering in its eyes. Lurel's chant grew louder, binding the corrupted dragon's mind with threads of forgotten truth. Slowly, the rage softened, the beast's breath clearing. With a final roar, it collapsed, freed from the blight's hold. The villagers emerged, eyes wide with awe and relief. Tamlin looked at the fallen dragon, knowing many battles remained, but this victory was a sign that even the deepest wounds could heal. Back at Sulfarian, Lurel faced new challenges. The Concordat's grip was loosening but not broken. Some elders clung to power, refusing to accept their past mistakes. Lurel's truth was both a sword and a shield, cutting through lies but also making her a target. She found allies among the young, the curious, and the hopeful. Together, they began to rewrite history, teaching the real story of dragons, humans, and elves. Schools opened their doors to new ideas, and whispers of unity grew louder. Tamlin returned to Castal, rebuilding his forge and crafting tools and weapons not just for war but for peace. He taught others the secret of memory-forged steel, though the full ritual remained his alone. The villagers came to see him not just as a smith but as a guardian of hope. One evening, as firelight flickered in the village square, Tamlin and Lurel spoke of the future. What comes next? Tamlin asked. We've broken the curse at its source, but the world is still fragile. Lurel smiled softly. We build. We remember. We heal. And we stand ready for whatever comes. Above them, stars shone steady and bright, a silent promise that even in the darkest times, light could return. The days grew longer and the seasons shifted, but the scars of the past still lingered like shadows at the edge of every heart. Tamlin and Lurel had become symbols of a new era, one where memory was power and unity a fragile but precious hope. The tale of the human smith who defied Dragonfire spread across kingdoms, carried by travelers, bards, and whispered prayers. Yet the world was not healed overnight. Pockets of darkness remained, dragons still lost to rage, mistrust between peoples, and wounds too deep for time alone to mend. Tamlin often found himself alone in his forge, the fire warm but the ache inside colder than ever. The faces of Miriam and Libby were always near, guiding each hammer stroke, reminding him why he fought. One evening, a messenger arrived with news from distant lands. A great gathering was planned, humans, elves, and dragons alike, to stand together and forge a new future. The old divisions would be challenged, and the first steps toward lasting peace would be taken. Tamlin and Lurel prepared for the journey. Ashurian, majestic and wise, soared overhead, a living link between past and future. The path was uncertain, the challenges great, but their resolve unshaken. At the gathering, voices rose in song and speech, sharing stories of loss, hope, and courage. Elders who once shunned each other now stood side by side. Dragons bowed their great heads to humans and elves alike, acknowledging shared pain and shared dreams. Tamlin spoke last, his voice steady and full of emotion. We have carried fire and memory, grief and strength. The curse tried to erase who we are, but memory endures. It is our greatest weapon and our deepest shield. Lurel added, the truth is a flame that burns away lies. It heals wounds and lights the way. We must remember, our history, our pain, and our love, to build a future worthy of all. As the gathering closed, a new bond was forged, not of magic or steel, but of trust and choice. The world would never be perfect, but it could be better, shaped by those willing to remember and endure. Tamlin returned home, his forge no longer a place of mourning but of creation. He crafted tools to build, not just weapons to defend. Lurel returned to Sulfarian, carrying the truth to those who would listen, planting seeds of change. Ashurian flew high above, guardian and friend, watching over lands once broken but now beginning to heal. In the quiet moments, Tamlin often touched the faint scars on his hands, the mark of sacrifice and hope. Memory was fire, yes, but it was also light. And from light, new life could always be born.